We are coming up on the 20th anniversary of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. And there are a multitude of problems that are affecting the 9/11 truth movement, a multitude of problems. Um, and in this video, I want to point out a couple of points that I think is the problem with the 9/11 truth movement and what's the problem with debunkers and skeptics and anyone involved with the 9/11 uh, with 9/11 history. Um, and I think the first point I'm going to raise is the non-activity that I'm seeing in viral media. Um, just a couple of days ago, I get a message from a fellow 9/11 researcher who tells me that Facebook is dead. Well, you know, Facebook has been going through their own problems by suspending mainly conservative voices from their platforms for spreading disinformation. And this is where I don't believe in suppressing speech. For example, I hate Alex Jones, but I don't want to restrict his speech. I want people to see the nonsense that he's espousing. When it comes to suppressing free speech, uh, it's dangerous to allow uh, platforms who are backed by corporate money, who are also donors to the state. Uh, it's dangerous to allow platforms to be politically motivated to suppress a certain type of speech because that can lead to all types of problems in the future. It won't end with conservative voices. It won't end by censoring liberal voices either. Um, you can see where I'm going with this. There will only be one type of voice, and that is the voice of the state and those who cater to it. Uh, so, with that being said, even from the most passionate truthers that are on viral media, Facebook, Twitter, VK, Odyssey, Rofkin, nothing. I'm seeing tumbleweed, virtual tumbleweed on these forums. And it's really surprising because I once made a prediction that once we get to about 2 months closer to the anniversary, we're going to see an uptick in interest. And coming from my own experience, I'm posting daily on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, uploading videos, uploading articles, uploading uh, files and documents, and I'm not even getting any response. Now, it's just not just me; it's coming from other fellow 9/11 researchers that I'm seeing, where they're not getting any hits whatsoever. Now, whether we're shadow banned or whatnot, but I'm in 19 9/11 groups, and it's like no one, hardly anybody, is posting informative information or any type of information whatsoever. And in order to get interest, to get new faces, to get people interested, and you want to reach a wide audience very quickly, the viral media is the way to go. And I try to flood viral media with pertinent information to suppress the disinformation that is unfortunately the prominent voice of 9/11. And I think that's one problem that needs to be rectified. We need people in the truth movement to uh, be a prominent voice on viral media. It's okay to go outside on the street corner and yell in a bullhorn and have signs. You might reach a couple of hundred people, but you could reach tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands on viral media because that's the future. And if we don't have our voices heard on viral media, then 9/11 will go the way of JFK, and it'll be often remembered as, oh, yeah, I remember that. 50 years passed. And so it's not too far away. I mean, 20 years, we have to get the ball rolling. Now we have a whole month of August. Maybe that will change and we'll have a lot of people vested interest. But as of right now, I'm very surprised that it hasn't. And I'm very surprised it's not coming from the truth movement themselves because they have the biggest voices of all. Another point I'd like to bring up, I think, is a problem is the disregard for new information by the truth movement in an age of technological advancements where information is revealed daily. Every day we get new information about 9/11, especially in the geopolitical atmosphere, right? We're always coming across about the motivations of certain countries, the intelligence apparatuses that were involved with the suspects involved with the plot, um, the hijackers themselves, their histories, their backgrounds. I mean, it's all right there at your fingertips. But the truth movement has become a very stagnant movement. And what I mean by that is that they have listened to the antagonist voices. Those are the fringe conspiracy theorists, because that was what those were the prominent voices of the truth movement from the get go, right after, just days after 9/11. I mean, the first conspiracy surrounding 9/11 isn't just the official narrative. It's basically Thierry Mason, who wrote a book called Gate, and he basically showed a photograph of the second floor of the Pentagon while the first floor was being covered by the foam of the fire truck. And he said that was the entry hole. And it wasn't really given much attention until Loose Change came out and Alex Jones promoting the film and also propagating that falsehood. And Loose Change is unfortunately the most popular 9/11 documentary in the world by far. The only good thing about Loose Change was that it brought attention to millions of people. However, the information that they purported in the film basically made millions of people look down the rabbit hole, which was a dead end. No plane attack at the Pentagon. The phone calls may have been manipulated. The hijacked planes landing in Cleveland. No plane crash at Shanksville. I mean, there was a lot of disinformation in that film. But however, as the years passed, more information became available on the internet. What did the truth movement do? Disregard that information because they were so passionate about their previous held beliefs that they weren't going to let go of those beliefs because everything that contradicted it basically can be basically are either labeled as state narratives or shill narrative from the CIA, the State Department, et cetera, the FBI, or it was basically coming from a troll and they're basically trying to upend the truth movement. There are people in the truth movement right now, dozens of them. I'm not talking about the followers of these people. I'm talking about the antagonists. People like Christopher Bolin, Rebecca Roth, Barbara Honegger, Craig McKee, Citizens Investigation Team, even though they're basically not active anymore. These people who propagate disinformation about no hijackers, no planes. When I say no planes, I mean no hijacked planes. And that is given attention to by people who don't really do much in the way of research or don't know how. And most people in the truth movement, they don't read. They'd rather watch a short film on the subject or a short film from the people that they follow because it agrees with their worldview. Most of these people are evangelical Christians. They hate Israel. They hate Zionism, while some of them really just hate Israel. They basically give Saudi Arabia a pass. Arabs are the patsies, Jews are to blame. The Illuminati are to blame as well, or uh, this nefarious government, the shadow government. And so, even with the trials of Zacharias Moussaoui, even with documents and files released by the State Department or the FBI or the investigations into those entities, not everything's a lie. You know, this is another problem for the truth movement is that they look at the 9/11 Commission final report and they basically, the antagonists like David Ray Griffin, Jim Fetzer, Alex Jones, basically told you that everything in it is a lie. So that means you don't have to read it. You just could look at the book and say, I don't believe it. It's coming from the State Department, and they had a part to play because they basically lied about 9/11. True to an extent. But there are factual information in the book. I know, I've read it. For example, planes were hijacked. Now, I know there's a good percentage in the truth movement that don't believe planes were hijacked that day. But guess what? Planes were hijacked. In fact, there was going to be more planes that were hijacked. And if you actually looked at information online, you'll notice that there were extra planes being hijacked, which, by the way, goes against the official narrative purported by the FBI and State Department. It said it was just 19 Muslim men. It was more. And if there's more, then that means that goes against the hypothesis that Osama bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed only sent 19 men. If there were more, who were these people? And who sent them? And who trained them? And so that is another point I'd like to make. There is a ton of information that's out there that provides information and shows actual anomalies which contradict the 9/11 Commission report and the FBI's own investigation, Pent Bomb, which was basically the cover-up arm. The CIA and the NSA were basically the ones that didn't share information. Now, I know the Truth Movement don't talk about Alex Station, which was the Bin Laden issue station, which was the CIA virtual station, which was following Bin Laden and Al Qaeda, which was gaining information about Bin Laden and Al Qaeda years prior to the 9/11 attacks. So much so, the NSA, which was listening to the phone calls of Osama bin Laden's satellite phone and to a Al Qaeda communications hub in Sana'a, Yemen, years prior to the attacks. Al Qaeda operatives were talking on those phones. What do you think they were talking about? Operations. Well, if they were talking about operations and the NSA didn't share the information, there you have your inside job. But if you don't believe in hijackers or hijacked planes, there's no necessary reason to look at any information online at all. And that's why you are where you are now. 20 years, you're still stagnant. You haven't gone anywhere. Especially in the age of technology, rapid technology at your fingertips right now. There is no reason for you to be out there 20 years and you still don't know whether planes were hijacked or that there were hijackers? Do you know that by doing that, you basically absolve everybody from 9/11? The NSA, the CIA, the Israeli Mossad, the Saudi GID, because without hijackers, all these agencies who are monitoring them, assisting them with logistics and finances, you just absolve them because what hijackers? There's no hijackers, there's no agencies who are monitoring them. And there's no operations involved with monitoring them, like Able Danger, which was uh, a, a covert operation that was headed by the Defense Intelligence Agency and the U.S. Army, or the CIA's lead operation at Sana'a, Yemen. Another point I'd like to raise is that, and this is a huge problem, which has led to the downfall of the truth movement, and that is tolerating fringe conspiracy theorists. As I mentioned before, in 2001, one of the very first fringe conspiracy theorists was Thierry Mason. And immediately following after him was Alex Jones and Jim Fetzer, David Ray Griffin. And over the years, you had um, Christopher Bolin, Citizens Investigation Team, Ace Baker, John Lear, Morgan Reynolds, Pilots for 9/11 Truth, uh, the Loose Change Crew, um, Judy Wood, Rebecca Roth, Barbara Honegger, Craig McKee. And I know I'm missing a whole bunch. Uh, Simon Shack, Phil Jahan from Let's Roll Forums, Brian Staveley, Willis Butts, and just a cult mentality of these people. Later, I mean, you had even people like Dan Hennon and I want to say, no, he's not much of a fringe conspiracy theorist. Luke Radowski, you know, the real, you know, real antagonists. What I mean by antagonists, these are people that espouse the most ridiculous conspiracies that have basically hurt the Trubits so much so that they are now led by these people, where that wasn't the case in the early 2000s. You still had good, reputable people: David Chandler, Wayne Costi, John Gold, um, Press for Truth, uh, Paul Thompson, just really good people. And then these people took over after 2006 and 7. They basically have become the prominent voices. And what the truth movement did, the older voices that still hung around, because some did leave, but the old proponents of the truth movement, they basically tolerated them. And the reason why they tolerated them was because they brought numbers with them and they wanted to grow. So instead, the mistake they made, which is now coming back to haunt them, was that they were more interested in quantity rather than quality. You don't need 50,000 people to make a difference in the judicial system. You don't even need 10,000. You just need 100, 200 people, experts in their fields, reputable people, not those of the fringe conspiracy uh, movement. You just need a couple of experts and you can make a difference. You can go to court with the information that you have. Or you're somebody who believes that even the courts won't take your evidence because they're also in on it. Well, tell that to the law firms of Creedler and Motley Rice, two law firms who are representing the victims' families. They're getting somewhere in the Southern District of New York. Miraculous at best because they're suing the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which left the most evidence behind in financial transactions regarding former U.S. Saudi ambassador to the United States, Bandar bin Sultan, who was close friends with the Bush family, who had payments from rigged banks to his wife, Haifa bin Faisal, who sent payments to Mawida Dawijak, who's the wife of Osama Basnan, a Saudi officer who was friends with Omar al Bayoumi, who was in California, and those payments went to Khalid al Midar, Nawaf al Hazmi, Mohammed Atta, and Hani Hanjour, the suspects of 9/11. But the conspiracy theorists basically just say that Israel's involved with 9/11 and the Saudis are patsies, and that there's a deep state involved. Although they can't tell you who's involved with the deep state, they just know it's the deep state and it exists somewhere as a physical entity. Meanwhile, it's basically a mythical entity. There is no deep state, there is only the state. Congress is corrupt from the top down. That's why I don't get with the left and right paradigm. People vote on those issues of left and right. When in the major issues like foreign policy, healthcare, there's only one entity. There is no left and right. When it comes to supporting foreign entities like Saudi Arabia and the Gulf or Israel, there is no left and right. There is no divide. There is one entity and they support them. But conspiracy theorists who basically propagate that there are no planes that were hijacked, that there were no hijackers involved with the operation, that Osama bin Laden is basically cleared. He never was involved with 9/11 attacks, and that space beams melted the World Trade Center but left human beings unsinged, but it burnt cars and melted concrete, or that there were nuclear suitcases at the bottom of the World Trade Center, and that's what blew up the trade centers, or that the jumpers at the World Trade Center basically were mannequins and dummies. That's what Let's Roll forums were pushing. Phil Jahan, Brian Staveley, Willis Butts, Dan Hennon, they pushed that nonsense. And the truth movements, such as Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, have these fringe conspiracists representing them. Now, I knew Barbara Honecker for years. She's basically an enormous fraud. She espouses that a white plane crashed into the heliport and that an explosion, a bomb, created the damage, which she says is only 16 feet wide, and that no plane was seen anywhere besides the white plane, and that the debris that you see was basically planted. Now, she basically changes that changes that scenario every once in a while, but the essence of the argument is the same. She's actually a high-ranking board member for Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. These are lawyers, not fake lawyers, they're real lawyers. Mick Harrison, David Meesweekle, I forgot the other gentleman's name. Bill Jacoby is another. These are lawyers. You would think, using their scientific method and judicial reasoning, they wouldn't even touch Barbara Honecker with a 10-foot pole. Not only do they not touch her with a 10-foot pole, but they ask her to be a high rank, to be a board member. So you have to start thinking, like, why would they allow Honecker to represent them? Is it about money? Is it about the transparent veil, thinly transparent veil of fame? Because she was actually working under the Reagan administration at that point. even espousing conspiracy theories back then with October surprise. They knew her position. And the reason why is basically, I found out recently that Dave Meesweekle himself espouses similar conspiracies. I found out through a radio show that he used to host, but he left, called Quantum Matrix Radio. And if you haven't heard about this podcast, if you're into the most crazed, fanatical theories, such as 5G, such as coronavirus being just the flu, go there. Dave Meesweekle, I did a couple pause and plays, which are basically my critique of an audio or video from Fringe conspiracy theories. One of them happened to be Dave Meesweekle, who was actually being interviewed by Pamela Sanzi on the show. Pamela Sanzi is the host. Dave Meesweekle is the co-host. And they were talking about Shanksville, and they were talking about the Pentagon, and they were talking that no plane had crashed at both sites, and that the people weren't on these planes, they weren't killed, and that the phone calls were faked, and that the debris was planted, and that everybody from the federal, state, and local levels were in on it. That's who's leading the judicial area of the 9/11 truth movement. This is who you're supporting. Now, I know certain truthers who I'm actually tentatively friends with online who daily support these people. Why? Why would you support people who basically facilitate fringe conspiracies that are not true, which actually hurt the truth movement in the public eye? Back in 2006 and 7, Fox News interviewed Kevin Barrett, Morgan Reynolds. Why? Because back then they were espousing the no planes, no hijackers argument. Did they talk to John Gold? Did they talk to Paul Thompson? No. There's a reason why they did this, because you in the truth movement, who basically tolerate these people, allow them to exist, then they get airtime, and then you basically are the victims of it. It hurts you. And by hurting you, you hurt us, the people, the public. And in the future, if there's ever any type of new organization that's out there who don't have fringe conspiracy theorists, who basically do go by the evidence, they're going to be put in the same category as the fringe conspiracy theorists in the public view. Oh, they're going against the aficionados. Oh, they must be nut jobs. Because I remember Morgan Reynolds on TV. I remember John Lear on TV, Kevin Barrett. What Fox News did was brilliant. They basically took the most fanatic idiots, put them on the air, and said, that's the 9/11 truth movement. Damage is done. The public view looks at the 9/11 truth movement as nothing more than a joke because you allowed it to happen. And you did nothing. You did nothing to critique these people. For years, I'm online, and I don't see anybody from the truth movement doing what I'm doing, and it's no pat on my back. I shouldn't be having to do this by critiquing these people openly. You should have been doing it from day one, and you didn't. You allowed them to exist in your group, and some of you were even blackballed by them and kicked out of certain truth movements yourself. For example, Wayne Costi. Wayne Costi did a brilliant presentation about the Pentagon. He shouldn't have had to have done this, but he had to do it because so many people in the truth movement are espousing this ridiculous hypothesis. that no plane crashed into the Pentagon. He did a 5-hour presentation. It was presented to the 9/11 consensus panel because many people on that panel were propositioning that no plane crashed into the Pentagon. What happened after that? Right like attack dogs, Craig McKee and his cult, and they are a cult, Adam Syed, Adam Ruff, Sheila Casey, Kelly David, Barry Zwicker, no, really nobody's when it comes to 9/11. They know nothing about it. All they're just cheerleaders. Just reputable, disgusting folk. They went on the attack to Wayne Costi, leaving him emails, basically kicking him out of teleconferences, basically blackballing these people. And by doing that, they blackballed David Chandler, who at one point was the most important face of the truth movement, the last really reputable face of the truth movement, I could say. And with that group, David Chandler and Wayne Costi and Ken Jenkins, magnificent people who helped build the truth movement, are now blackballed by them, ignored, shunned by the very movement that they helped to create. At least they tried to fight back. But the rest of you in architects and engineers, or at the Truth Action Project, or the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, and other smaller truth organizations and groups that are now defunct, I blame you for not standing up to the disinformation that has now destroyed the truth movement. And the truth movement is destroyed. Destroyed. You don't like hearing it? I don't care. It's destroyed. You have done nothing to further your goals. You're basically, all you have left is Facebook. Another point I like to raise is the truth movement not having any legitimate voices, lawyers, foreign policy experts, those two areas. Now, when it comes to engineers and architects, I am not qualified to speak on this subject because I don't know anything about physics. Whether the towers came down from controlled demolition or bombs, it wouldn't surprise me. I happen to think that World Trade Center 1 and 2 definitely were compromised in the basement levels. I mean, you do have people that basically were down there and they said they heard multiple explosions. I'm sorry, that's not going to come from jet fuel because it couldn't have traveled down the elevator shafts because there are two elevators, one for the top part of the World Trade Center, the other for the bottom part. So how did jet fuel come crashing down? Could be wrong, but I happen to think that there were bombs in the basement levels, which would compromise the base of the building. However, and I'm not counting Dave Meesweekle as legitimate. He's a fringe conspiracy theorist. And I hope he sees this because he has to be called out. Why Mick Harrison? I don't know about Mick Harrison's position. I never heard his position, but why he tolerates this, I don't know why. I don't think Bill Jacoby is a French conspiracy. I could be wrong. I don't know. Why is he tolerated? I don't know. You're not going anywhere. You're lost in New York. You have a case in Washington, D.C. regarding anthrax. Good luck, because there was some cover up and shenanigans with that. Bruce Ivins didn't send those letters. That anthrax strain came from Ames strain in Iowa State, in which the FBI destroyed the database to. So obviously, there was a cover up there. But there are no legitimate lawyers or foreign policy analysts in your group. None in architects and engineers. They basically just cater to the physics. When it comes to the lawyers committee, Jane Clark is a crackpot. Barbara Honegger is a crackpot. She's not a lawyer. Dave Meeswinkle is a crackpot. He's a lawyer. You know, ridiculous. So you don't have a legitimate voice. And Truth Action Project, dead in the water. They're going to be a defunct organization probably a year or two from now. Because once the 20th anniversary passes, you know, what are they going to do? I mean, they don't even help their own cause because they allow certain fringe conspiracists to become board members too, like Dan Hennon. He's the treasurer. J.P. Hawkinsmith, who's in charge of, I think, media, whatever. And these are notorious people. Like, they don't even think kids died at Sandy Hook. Dan Hennon, who's the treasurer of Truth Action Project, basically told me once that the Sandy Hook kids are not dead. They actually helped in singing the national anthem at Super Bowl 51. This is who's representing these groups. And you wonder why society, public, laughs at these people. A joke, complete joke. So I ask the truth movement, you truthers out there, why do you support these groups? Is it because we gotta support somebody? You don't have to support them. Create a new movement, create a new group, and vet the people that come into this group. Make sure that they don't cater to or espouse ridiculous fantasies and fringe conspiracies. Because that's what destroyed the movement from within. It wasn't the CIA. It wasn't the FBI. It wasn't Israel. It wasn't Saudi Arabia. It was yourself. You did this to yourselves. And you had 20 years to try and get lawyers on your side. I know a slew of them who I'm friends with on Facebook, on Twitter. I talk to them sometimes and they're in Guantanamo. But you have to believe in hijackers to actually become affiliated with them, because once you start espousing your beliefs and they, go against the evidence and the factual history behind 9/11, well, yeah, get away from me. Maybe that's the reason why you don't have lawyers in your ranks or experts in the field of foreign policy or counterterrorism. Who wants to be affiliated with you? You're a cancer. Now, you may find this to be rude, but I'm telling you the truth. Either you're going to be dismissive of what I have to say and say I'm the idiot or I'm the shill and I'm wrong, or you're going to look inward in these groups and say, hey, these guys really are espousing falsehoods. I'm getting out of here. Because you can't call yourself a truther when you support liars. It's a contradiction. 20 years and you don't got experts in your fields? Another point I think there is a problem with the truth movement is that the main truth groups, like the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, Truth Action Project, We Are Change New York, Architects and Engineers, Scholars for 9/11 Truth, I think they're defunct. But these truth groups have remained stagnant after 20 years and did not even move forward where it mattered, which was the courts. Now, I know I brought up Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. They're trying to sue the federal government, and they're having a problem because there are a number of people in that committee that don't even believe they were hijackers. That's a problem. Because who you going to sue? It's really simple. The CIA and the NSA were monitoring hijackers years prior to the attacks. That information was never shared with the FBI or the State Department for 16 months. I'll bring you a certain instance. The CIA were monitoring a house in Yemen that I talked about before that was owned by a man named Ahmed al-Hada, who's an associate of Osama bin Laden from the Afghan-Soviet War era. This house was basically the communications hub for al-Qaeda, signals intelligence, phone calls. Living with him was a man by the name of Khalid al-Midar at times, who married Ahmed al-Hada's daughter, Hoda al-Hada. So he was basically the son-in-law. The CIA was running a tap. The NSA was running a tap on the phone inside that house, as well as running a tap on the satellite phone of bin Laden, which is where they got the number from. They told the CIA this, and the CIA then took over the operation because they were the main agency involving investigations of terrorism abroad, not here in the States. That's the FBI's job, Department of Justice. But the CIA began running the operations there, and they had a bug inside the house, but not on the phone. The NSA weren't sharing that half of the cables with the CIA, and so the CIA wasn't sharing their half of the information with the FBI or the State Department. Now they heard about a big Al Qaeda meeting in Malaysia, and they told the FBI about this. And so the CIA asked Malaysian authorities to take photographs of who was coming in out of this condominium where all the biggest names of the terrorist underworld were invited to. People like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ridwan Isamuddin, who is the co-leader of Jeddah Islamiyah, a terrorist group in Indonesia. Khalid al-Midar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, Salim al-Hazmi, who these guys were involved with the 9/11 attacks. Walid bin Atash, who's a high level Al Qaeda operative, a financier, a coordinator, who was behind allegedly the bombing of the USS Cole in 2000. Zacharias Moussaoui was alleged to have reported one day to the meeting. And so for 3 days, this meeting went on. And so Khalid al-Midar and Nawaf al-Hazmi left the meeting, and they were being followed by the CIA. And the CIA basically said, we lost track of them because they went to the United States. But the NSA never lost track because they kept monitoring the cell phone of Nawaf al-Hazmi. Now Nawaf al-Hazmi, his name came up at the Yemen hub. And so that's how they put a track on his phone. So they came to the United States. The CIA knew they came to the United States. January 15th, 2000. There are some discrepancies about their arrival date. It could have been the 13th. They stood at a hotel maybe. But let's just say it's the 15th. So the NSA and the CIA knew about this. And they didn't tell the FBI. Because according to the FBI, they would have put a tail on these guys. And guess what? 9/11 would have never happened. Because they would have monitored them. Because Khalid al-Midar and Nawaf al-Hazmi were suspected of being involved at some level with the 1998 East Africa bombings. And considering they were Al-Qaeda, they would be deemed as terrorists. But they weren't on a watch list. For 16 months, the CIA and the NSA never told the FBI or the State Department about these two men. And who is monitoring these two men inside the United States? Well, the Saudis, the General Intelligence Directorate, the GID, Omar al-Bayoumi, Osama Basnan, other Saudi officials who are financing these people, monitoring these people, giving them cars, lodging. They live with an FBI informant at one time in California. His name was Abdussatter Sheikh, who didn't report to his handler who these two men were while they were in renting a room from him in San Diego. And out east, members of the Hamburg cell. That's Muhammad Atta, Marwan al Shehi, Ziad Jarrah. They were monitored by the Israelis using moving front companies such as Urban Moving Systems to follow these people where they were going. But neither the Saudis or Israelis were reporting to the FBI or the State Department about what they were doing. Meanwhile, the NSA was still listening to the phone calls of Nawaf al-Hazmi and the Yemen hub. According to former senior executive Thomas Drake of the NSA, he basically said that the NSA collected so much metadata, they could have stopped 9/11 completely because they knew where these people lived in the United States and abroad. They knew they heard their phone calls, they read their emails, they read their text messages. That's a lot of data, really was. And the excuse they gave was because they didn't have the manpower to transcribe the data. That could be true, but I find it highly unlikely since the most important operation in the world at the time was the monitoring of the Yemen hub, which had the attention of the two biggest agencies in the world, the CIA and the NSA. But who told the Saudis and Israelis that these men were inside the United States? Why specifically monitor them? Well, if you don't believe in hijackers or hijacked planes, all of what I just said to you doesn't exist. And that's why you have failed in the courts, because you never reached that level, because you had people like Barbara Honegger and Dave Meesweigel and the other antagonists, the disinformation agents like Alex Jones and Jim Fetzer and Derry Mason and Loose Change and Piles for 9/11 Truth and CIT and John Lear, and the list is endless. You tolerated these people and you allowed them to grow, to make groups in the judicial and through media, representing judicial and media arm of the truth movement, and they went nowhere. Nowhere. 20 years you had, and you did not obtain anything. Nothing. There's nothing to show for it. And for the older truth people, Ken Jenkins and Wayne Costi and David Chandler, I feel sorry for these people because they were made victims and they were suspected to taunts and labeled as traitors and shills and government operatives. I'm called this almost daily by the truth movement as well. You tolerated these people and they destroyed you from within. And that's why you haven't gotten anywhere judicially. It's not like you file freedom of information requests regarding hijackers or the monitoring of hijackers because you don't believe in them. And if you think the phone calls are fake, and if you think the planes weren't real and that they were drones, you can't file freedom of information requests regarding cameras at the locations of these airports, which would probably show you a different story. Logan, Newark, JFK. I mean, why would you ask for information regarding those airports if you don't believe in hijackers? They never entered those airports. And therefore, you can't see the real anomalies of 9/11 in that there was extra hijackers. Well, if there was extra hijackers, who trained them? Who told them to come into the plot? Because that goes against the official narrative of 19 men. And so you failed in that direction. And you failed in trying to break through the media. Now, I'm with you here. I think the legacy media is a cancer and they lie every day. But there's independent media, real good sources. And you failed to break through with even them because of your outrageous fringe conspiracy scenarios that just defy belief and defy the physical and eyewitness testimonies of people who were there. Because according to you, anybody who contradicts your worldview or your beliefs into 9/11 is basically the sinful part of the world. They can't be trusted. They can't be believed. Nothing they say is right. The 9/11 Commission report, which you say is the official narrative. What is the official narrative? You don't even know what the official narrative is. To you, it's 4 planes that were hijacked and they crashed into the World Trade Center. That's it, by 19 Muslim fanatics. That's a small part of the story of the 9/11 Commission report. There's 14 chapters, 700 pages. It's not official narrative. It's a missing narrative. It's an incomplete narrative because they didn't add in the extra hijackings. They didn't add in Able Danger program in which they interviewed Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, who I interviewed, Eric Kleinsmith, involved with Able Danger. They didn't add them into the story. They barely talk about Yemen Hub. They don't talk about the connections they had between the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and to 9/11 and how these operations evolved over time and why they did. Because if you don't believe in hijackers or hijacked planes, then there's no reason for you to go back in time and look at the previous events which had a connection to 9/11. That includes the foundation of the beliefs of these people, Wahhabism, which is contradictory to the teaching of the Prophet Muhammad, right? You don't need to look into the intelligence agencies that were monitoring these people years prior, because if there's no hijackers, there's no monitoring of these people. So you don't have to look into the CIA, the NSA. You don't need to look into the foreign policy aspect. To you, it's basically Israel, 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 and that's the whole problem. That's what Christopher Bolin teaches, a notorious anti Semite. I could say that confidently. He's a notorious anti Semite, but he's one of the most popular faces of the truth movement. Why? Because most of you who don't believe in planes or hijackers believe Israel is a part is the major antagonist of 9/11. They're the operators, they constructed 9/11. And so you listen to who agrees with your worldview, Bolin. And Christopher Bolin knows exactly who to cater to. He doesn't cater to skeptics. He doesn't cater to debunkers. He doesn't cater to those who know nothing about 9/11. He caters to you, the fringe movement, because you're dumb enough and irresponsible enough not to fact check what he says. And he preys on that. He knows that. That's the same thing for Rebecca Roth. For those who think that she's a 30-year employee of some airline industry, no, she never worked for any airline industry. In fact, that's not even her real name. She goes by many names: Monica Gaynor, Corianne Ashley. She used to be a voice for beauty products on YouTube. That got taken down over the years. But yet you buy her books and you listen to her, and you're the ones who gave her existence in the truth movement, not the debunkers, not the skeptics. The truth movement did. And that's why it's your fault that you basically went nowhere in the court. You went nowhere with the people and you destroyed yourselves. So, my final point is, what needs to change going forward? Wow, a lot. It's a pipe dream. Now, of course, I'm a pessimist. In fact, I'm a hopeless pessimist. That's my anomaly. And I'm not painting the entire truth movement as nothing more than whack jobs. There are excellent truthers, advocates. I'll name them. Like I said, Wayne Costi, David Chandler, Ken Jenkins, John Wyndham, Warren Stutt, Fran Shore, John Gold, Paul Thompson, Kevin Fenton, Ray Nowolski, John Duffy, Gene Laratonda. Gene's probably surprised because I know that he supports Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. But here's a guy who lives in Pennsylvania and he travels on his own dime to New York City and stays here for a week yelling into a yell horn about 9/11 truth. How many people could say they do that? I don't do that. Now, I may disagree with certain parts of his message. I know he just caters to the collapse of World Trade Center 7. I think that's a mistake because there's so much more to 9/11 than just the collapse of the World Trade Center towers. But I can understand his passion regarding these areas. It does need attention, whether you agree with controlled demolition or not. It's a part of 9/11. That's another mistake the truth movement makes, is that they're willing to, because the Pentagon and Shanksville are such a polarizing divide in the truth movement, it basically created multiple groups in the truth movement, all fighting with one another. That's another problem the truth movement has. And so Gene Laratonda and other people won't touch the Pentagon issue because it's such a divisive issue. And they believe in they believe, I hate to say it, but naively, that they believe that everybody in the truth movement should act as one. It's a great concept. I wish it was the truth, but it's not. And Gene knows this. But he's an optimist, and we need more optimists. Really do. I respect the hell out of that guy for that reason alone. Um, and there are others. I mean, there are others who I met: Michael Santangelo, Morgan Nolan. Those solid guys, man. I've really grown to like them because they went against the narrative. And I used to generalize saying that, everybody in the truth movement basically, caters to like the fringe conspiracy theory. Well, Mike Santangelo proved me wrong. And I'm very grateful for that because it taught me a lesson that, I should never generalize at any point. Morgan Nolan, who's a part of the Truth Action Project, here's a passionate guy fighting a war on two fronts, trying to get people to know more about 9/11. You can't but respect people like these two guys. They're young guys, young men. Man, we need more of those. We need more of Michael Santangelo and Morgan Nolan. We really do. But they're few and far between. And what needs to change, in my opinion, is a top down clean out of the truth movement. Now, you're going to lose probably, I'll be liberal here and say 80%, because most of the truth movement at this point are led by fringe conspiracy theorists. They just are. That's the truth. Very few reputable voices left. Very few. I could count them on my hand. That's unfortunate. Whatever is left of the truth movement that's reputable, that's goes by the evidence and not by speculation and theory and falsehoods, need to disassociate completely from the fringe conspiracy theorists. You have to call them out for what they are. You can't be silent on this issue, because once you remain silent about the very people who are destroying your truth movement, you're complicit in it. This is the reason why I'm agitated that I'm one of the very few people, along with Nelson Martins, and there's a few others like Sean Russell and Darren Harvey and Ed Brotherton, who basically are, Sven Larnitz, who I just met online, and Ruben Latour. We're a very small group, a very minuscule, and we're fighting a mountain of disinformation. But yet we have at least we're calling these people out. Well, guess what? You people in the truth movement who far have more numbers on your side, even if you have 20% of reputable people, you guys need to be the most vocal of all, because they represent you, the truth movement. They're destroying your name. They're bringing your name in the mud, dragging you in the public eye. See, look, he's a crazy nut job. And the society is going to look at the groups that you affiliate with, and they're going to say, oh, are they nuts too? They must be. Why else are they in that group? You have to take the initiative and call people like Dave Meesweekle and Barbara Honegger out, and Dan Hennon and JB Hawkinsmith, who are board members. Architects and engineers is like, out of the three, they're the most reputable. Why on God's green earth, and I'm an atheist, by the way, so that's a contradiction. Why on God's green earth did they allow a known crackpot, Craig McKee, to act as a writer? You could have had any number of people to basically write for you. You chose a crackpot in Craig McKee, a notorious idiot. No, the reason why is because architects and engineers basically hired Kelly David, who's friends with Craig McKee and his cult, as the CEO. Oh, she's great with the numbers. But yet she's destroying your name from within, because guess who Andy Steele, who's the host interview of 9/11 Freefall Radio, guess who is he? He's inviting on his show to speak about 9/11. People who know nothing about it and who espouse no planes and no hijackers, like Craig McKee and Adam Syed and Sheila Casey. Nut jobs, crackpots who should be ignored by the truth movement forever, for life. I'm not telling you to restrict their speech. They should be ignored by the truth movement, casted out as nothing more than degenerates who have destroyed the truth movement, helped to destroy it by espousing these theories. So, yes, that's what needs to change. That's one area. Two, stop supporting the movements, the groups like Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry or Truth Action Project, and create your own movements, create your own groups, and don't involve the fringe conspiracy elements to be involved with these groups. 9/11 Truth Movement is a lost cause right now. I'm sorry to say it is, because today I was in a meeting and they had Cynthia McKinney there, and they're talking about COVID-19. You have 40 days left to the anniversary of September 11th, and you are basically talking about COVID-19. I left because I know whatever they're talking about 9/11, they're going to talk about World Trade Center 7 and did you know a third building fell? I'm sorry, we're well past that now. You're way beyond that. You don't have any suspects to show. You don't have, you can't bring that to court. I'm sorry, you just can't, or else you would have. You had 20 years to do it. And architects and engineers, what are they doing? They're selling you a comic book in which Andy Steele wrote. That's the best they could do with all the funding that you give them. That's the best they could do with 3,000 alleged experts in one field, architects and engineering. You have 3,000 people, and the best you could do is a freaking comic book. You would think 20 years now down the road, you'd have a single suspect. No, what do? You basically just say, pull it. Larry Silverstein said, pull it. Well, guess what? Even if pull it was a demolition term, and he basically said on live TV, this is what you believe. He basically said, I'm pulling my own building on live TV. I'm going to admit to it. What crime did he commit? No one died at World Trade Center 7. What crime did he commit? Oh, he made money off terrorism insurance. Guess what? That came along with winning the contract. And by the way, he didn't originally win the contract. That went to Vornado Realty. They won the contract, but they didn't. They had some discrepancies about how the contract was written, and then it was awarded to Larry Silverstein. But even then, he doesn't own the World Trade Center 7 complex. I mean, World Trade Center complex. He only owns World Trade Center 7. He rents it from the Port Authority. That's who owns the property. And he basically won the contract. And in August, July or August, in the contract came with his lawyers. I mean, Silverstein Property has lawyers, and they basically had terrorism insurance on it, which isn't a shocker because the World Trade Center itself was a terrorist, uh, a victim of terrorism in 1993. And it was always on the radar for years after. I mean, they made no bones about it. Bin Laden and Al Qaeda always referred to the World Trade Center as the face of the financial sector of the United States. And Bin Laden always wanted to hurt the United States in the financial sector, and he did. He dragged the United States to a war in Afghanistan, we're still there 20 years. Crushed our economy. All the money went to private contracting firms, the military industrial complex, the Pentagon, and the foreign lobbyists who were involved with Iraq and Afghanistan. And now it's extended to Syria, Libya. You ain't in court. That's what matters here. You being a cheerleader on the sidewalk or online is fine, but the only thing that matters is the courts right now. Well, guess who's not having a problem? Motley Rice and Creedler and other smaller law firms that are involved with suing the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But because you don't believe in hijackers, that means you can't sue the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And you're still trying to link Larry Silverstein as being with the Mossad and having some foreknowledge of the event, which I think he did. Can you prove it? Nope. And that's the difference between myself and you. You think speculation is a form of evidence. Well, guess what? It's not. You think Silverstein had something to do with knowing about the 9/11 attacks and didn't tell anybody about it? Prove it. The court of law. It's the only thing that matters here. Prove it. All this speculation about him being friends with Netanyahu. Yeah, he was friends with Netanyahu. Yeah, Netanyahu's a war criminal. Whoopie-do. Whoopie-do. Prove it. Only thing that matters. Your opinions don't matter squat. And that's why you failed in the courts. And what else needs to move and what else needs to change? The way you elucidate the message. If all you have is basically, did you know a third building fell? You're basically only going to get the attention of people who don't know anything about World Trade Center 7. Why should they? I love the fact that I see advocates in California basically have banners and saying, hey, did you know a third building fell on 9/11? Why the hell would they know that? First of all, it's 20 years down the road. They don't live in New York. They don't know anything about the landscape of New York. Yeah, they may know about the World Trade Center 7, World Trade Centers 1 and 2. Why would they know anything about World Trade Center 7? And if you're going to say that the media didn't report this, well, guess what? I got news for you. I had the news uploads on my channel, and guess what they were talking about for 10 days straight? The collapse of World Trade Center 7. Yeah, they were talking about it. but there is more to it than that. You don't talk about the geopolitics involved with 9/11 because you don't know anything about it, because it's such a broad and expansive area. Foreign policy, intelligence agencies, religious beliefs, um, uh, U.S. relations with Saudi Arabia, U.S. relations with Israel, huge, a lot of counterterrorism, the history of the CIA, the NSA, Pakistan ISI, the Mukbara. There's a whole lot here. Middle East affairs. That's why I don't have hair anymore. 12 years. I have a saying, I wish 9/11 was as simple as the truth movement made it out to be. That it was the deep state in Israel, that the hijackers didn't exist. They were planes that were remotely controlled by Dov Zakheim, who's hiding in a basement with an Atari controller with the planes, like some game. And to explain further, I don't need to. I'll just show you a Barbara Honegger video for 3 hours or a Christopher Bolin video, because you don't know anything about 9/11. Because the smoking gun is not World Trade Center 7, because you don't have a suspect, not one. I don't need the collapse of the towers to show that there was an inside job, that there were perpetrators involved, and that there were people who lied under oath at 2 congressional inquiries, people who hid information from the FBI and the State Department. I can show this. I can name names. You can't. And the reason is because you were either ignorant about the most important aspect of 9/11, which is the geopolitical area, or you're willfully ignorant and don't care to learn because it's either too big for you, or because you have previously held beliefs in the fringe categories that don't make you look into the profiles and backgrounds of the people involved. I'm going to end the video here. I said a lot, but those are my problems with the truth movement at the current time. And if you guys don't correct these issues in a short amount of time, I can assure you, when the 25th anniversary comes about, or when the 30th anniversary comes about, your your slogan is still going to be, did you know a third building fell on 9/11? And the public will condemn you forever as being nothing more than laughing stock, because you allowed fringe conspiracy theorists, who I named, to exist within your ranks and represent you as a whole. Do something about it.